Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Introduction to Psychology Part 1 PSY 312 by Dear Knowledge. Till now in the methods of psychology we have discussed the observation, the case history method, surveys and the experimental method. And in this video we will be discussing our last topic in the experimental method, that will be the Kozai experiment. And after that, in our next video, we will be discussing the interviewing technique or the interview method. That will be the last topic of the methods of psychology, or you can say that will be the last topic of the chapter 2 in the methods of that is the method of psychology. So in the experimental topic, in experimental method, we will be discussing the Kozai experiment. You can say it is also called a natural experiment, and we will also discuss the advantage, or you can say strength of experimental method and limitation of experiment. Strength or advantages of the whole experimental method and limitation of the whole experimental method. So let's start with the Kozai experiment. It is also called a natural experiment. The definition includes a Kozai experiment is an empirical interventional study used to estimate the causal impact of an intervention on target population without random assignment. There are two important points in the definition to be noted. First thing is that it is empirical. Empirical means that our senses are involved in it. And the second thing is that it is without random assignment. The only difference between the experimental method and the Kozai experiment is that in experiment we go for the random assignment so that each individual get equal chance to be participated, whereas in the Kozai experiment we do not go for the random assignment, we go without a random assignment. There are several such variables that cannot be manipulated in a laboratory setting. Besides, there are some ethical problems also that enables an experimental to conduct experimental studies. Kozai is a Latin word that means as if. So psychologists often want to study phenomena that is impossible or unethical to duplicate in the controlled laboratory settings. The independent variable is selected rather than manipulated by the experiment. For example, if someone wants to study the effect of an earthquake on victims, such a situation cannot be created in a laboratory. That is impossible. So in such situations, the researchers opt for the Kozai experiment. For example, in the experimental group, we can select people who are victims of the earthquake, and in the control group, those people who have experienced the earthquake but has not lost anything, that is, not directly victimized. Thus, in a Kozai experiment, the independent variables are not manipulated rather than selected from natural settings. Sometimes researchers are able to study such phenomena by taking advantage of naturally occurring events. In a natural experiment, the researchers carefully observe and measure the impact of a naturally occurring event on their study participants. For example, Gary Evans and his colleagues in 1998 used this strategy to study the effects of exposure to chronic noise on children. They compared the stress levels in elementary school children before and after a large international airport was built in their once quiet community near Munich, Germany. The researchers measured both physical and psychological indicators of stress, such as blood pressure, level of stress hormones, and perceptions of the daily quality of life. They also measured the same indicators over the same period of time in a matched control group of children who lived in a community that remained quiet. So the results of this natural experiments include the children who were exposed to chronic noise. The chronic noise is an independent variable. So the children who were exposed to the chronic noise showed increased psychological and physical stress. Now this increased psychological and physical stress is the dependent variable. So again, the children who were exposed to chronic noise, the independent variable, showed increased psychological and physical stress, the dependent variable. In contrast, the control group children who were not exposed to constant noise showed little change in stress. Evans and his colleagues in 1998 concluded that chronic noise does cause a significant increase in psychological stress in children. So, the strength of a well-designed experiment is that it can provide a convincing evidence of a cause and effect relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable. But experiments do have limitations, like the other methods of psychology. We have discussed advantages and disadvantages. Same is the case with experiments. They do have some limitations because experiments are often conducted in highly controlled laboratory settings. They are frequently criticized for having little to do with actual behavior. So that is the artificial conditions of some experiments may produce results that do not generalize well, which means that the results cannot be applied to real situations or to a more general population beyond the participants in the study. In order to make experimental conditions less artificial, the experimenters are sometimes conducted in a natural setting rather than in a laboratory. So this strategy was used in the Samstone study. All the experimental manipulations and measurements were conducted at the children's preschool. However, experiments conducted in natural settings have their own disadvantages, such as diminished experimental control. For example, in the Samstone study, it was impossible to control for what the preschool might have said to one another between the interviews. Another limitation of the experimental method is that even when it is impossible to create the conditions that the researchers want to study, it may be unethical to do so. So this was the end of the video. If you haven't watched the video on the experimental method, you can just simply click on the link I have given in the description. Go and watch that video, and then you will finally get the point about the experimental method, and then you can watch this Kuzai experiment. Then your concept will be more clear. If you like the video, you can click on the like button. Your concept is clear, you can click on the like button, and if not, you can ask from us in the comment, and we will try our level best to clear your concept over there. And for the upcoming videos, if you want to stay notified and you're new to this channel, you can subscribe to this channel. You can get the notification of the upcoming videos, and you can also share this video and the link of the channel with your friends and families and with your colleagues, etc., etc., because sharing is caring. Until then, Allah Hafiz.